Serving in the military can teach you many things: discipline, the importance of service, focus, and the determination to carry out goals. But who would have thought that it would also teach you the skills to attain financial freedom? To find out more about how this can happen, in this episode of the podcast, I talked to Joshua Brooks about what he learned in his military career as an Army chaplain on how to achieve your personal finance goals. My guest today is Joshua Brooks, the founder of Exponential Advisors and an Army Reserve chaplain with nearly 20 years of distinguished service. Drawing on his military discipline, faith-based principles, and expertise in cutting-edge financial strategies like Bitcoin and AI, Joshua empowers families and organizations to achieve financial security and growth. With a mission to impact 250 clients over the next decade, he delivers transparent, values-driven financial planning that offers lasting change. Joshua's approach is grounded in humility, integrity, and the belief that sound financial planning is essential for everyone. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Hey Steve, thanks man.
Hey, good to have you on. As Before I hit record, I was mentioning I just interviewed another military veteran, Army guy who came out of the military and started doing the sort of financial planning for folks. So I don't know, maybe this will be a sub thread on the podcast. We'll get a Navy guy or something in here.
There you
But
go.
there's a lot that the military can teach you. So I just wanted to start with your story. Why don't you tell our listeners your story? How did you decide to go from the Army with a nearly 20 year, I mean, you're a career Army at nearly 20 years, into finance? What prompted that change?
Yeah, a big change, but gradual change. So 21 years in the Army, infantry, Steve, chaplain corps now as a pastor to soldiers, and got married in 2016 to Stephanie. Now we have four boys. And so at that time, homeless ministry and preaching and Bible studies, that's not going to pay the bills. And so I was working in the Texas Army National Guard at the time. And so I started working at Fidelity Investments. I moved up from Houston to Dallas Fort Worth area at that Westlake Regional Center and Edward Jones. And it was just a natural transition. Now I launched my own firm this year. So I'm an independent advisor with Exponential Advisors.
Hmm. I guess what I'm saying is, all the stuff you did in the military, when you came out, what had you thinking, why don't I get into personal finance and financial planning? What in the Army sort of inspired that, if it was indeed your time in the Army?
Yeah, it goes back to one story at basic training with a guy named D. Filippi. And I've told this story so many times because it was so pivotal. And he recommended, in 2004, investing, at Fidelity or Vanguard. And so I actually took his advice when I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, and opened up a S&P 500 or opened up an IRA account. And the advisor in Seattle mentioned, the Spartan S&P 500 index fund, and that was my first foray into investments over 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So while in the Army, you were starting to invest with index funds, which is good. I think that's a smart move, and a because chances are you'll get some good results from it. Because index funds, there are very few funds these days managed that beat the market average, and you're ceding some of that increased return to the person managing the funds. So
hmm
was it particularly index funds that you were directed to, or is that something you discovered once you started getting into these platforms?
Nope, that one advisor at Fidelity, they took the time. You got to have a certain investment minimum to meet with an investment consultant or a financial consultant, and I certainly didn't have that as an enlisted soldier, even with a college degree at that time. So I had like $6,000 before taxes. So he's like, they made an exception. I didn't have the 125,000 or 250 minimum,
Yeah.
but they made an exception, and they just recommended that Spartan S&P. Keep it simple. And so, I was under the impression. I looked at the mutual funds and individual stocks, remember back in those days, and you research on the Motley Fool or Morningstar, and you have Christine Benz and these other guys. They're recommending, these individual stocks, and you could pay for a newsletter. So yeah, I kind of evolved over time with, an active approach to the more passive approach. Of course, Edward Jones, I worked there for several years, and they have a hybrid where you can invest in index funds there, as well as active funds in actively managed portfolios. But at the end of the day, in terms of stocks and bonds, I'm purely passive. Like, let's just have the indices, the ETFs. They're a solid investment vehicle, and you're not gonna, those you with the other mutual funds and stuff is not gonna outperform if they're actively managed over a certain period of time.
Yeah, well, that's really the way to go as far as long-term investing, to do it passively. I remember what you described. It was, and at the time I thought, well, this is a fad that's going to go away soon. These all these commercials about how you can get individuals are actively trading stocks on the market. I think there was one commercial about these women in a hair salon, and they're all chatting. Oh, I got an email alert, girls! This new tip or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, yeah, this isn't going to last too long because you start trying to do it actively, you start trying to do it yourself, and it really doesn't work for you. You mentioned ETFs, exchange traded funds. Any particular reason you got into that vehicle, or
Yeah, so I would go back to the emergence of ETFs, just the data, just showing you have ETF.com. There's a guy, Matt Hoogan, used to run that website. He's now actually with Bitwise Investments in the crypto space. But Matt, you got Morningstar. You just go where the data and the performance leads you, And so my personal portfolios, those are the ones that you see the data of these iShares from BlackRock or these Fidelity ETFs or Invesco or you name it, and you can build such a quality portfolio, minimal investment expenses, tax efficient, tax friendly investing. You can put them in IRAs, you can put them in non-retirement accounts, just beautiful.
do you stay within the same family of funds? You stay with Fidelity and go into different funds, or do you have some in Fidelity, some in Vanguard, some in Schwab, or how do you work that?
Yeah, so it's an eclectic mix for our clients. And so, as an independent advisor at Exponential Advisors, we custody our assets with Altruist, and they're a fintech platform. They're one of the best known brands for custodians, for independent advisors, and they just raised like in the hundreds of millions of dollars, just another round of funding for the expansion of their business. And so I'm very excited to continue to partner with Altruist in terms of the ETFs and passive investment portfolios that they offer.
Okay. Well, you learned that. Let's get back to you were in the military. You started getting into this, and in your time there, you mentioned both the infantry and with the chaplains corps. What lessons did you learn in the army specifically, or the military? Just that mindset that has helped you be so successful and help other people in the personal finance space.
Yes. So one of the first lessons that I want, Steve, that I want your listeners to hear on the Financial Freedom Podcast is that you have to take responsibility for your actions,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't matter if you have a certain amount of knowledge, a lot, or a little. You do the best that you can, and you will make mistakes, but you take responsibility for your actions. In the Army, we talked about mission planning. Okay, so can I give you a definition, like my definition of mission planning?
Sure.
So it's defining a clear objective, right? We would call that in the civilian world a goal, right?
Right.
And analyzing the environment and challenges, exploring ways to achieve the goal, selecting the best course of action, and preparing for execution and contingencies. That sounds like a lot,
Mhm.
right? To handle. But that's because when you're dealing with your personal finances, it is a lot to
Right.
handle. That's why, as a certified financial planner, I am board certified from the CFP board, of standards, and you have to go through the fundamentals of financial planning, insurance planning, tax planning, retirement planning, investment planning, all of those aspects. And each of those domains, Steve, they have different categories that you break down. The retirement planning has Social Security, and they have withdrawal rates. And so when people think, oh, it's all about investments, no, that's not the financial services industry anymore. It's about what is your insurance planning coverage, those types of things. So I think what that means in the big scope of things is that, like, if you have goals, listeners, it takes work, right? You can work with a professional, or you can DIY. You have different options, or you can trust, Uncle Bob at the Thanksgiving dinner that told you about investing in Netflix or Nvidia or the Chinese stock, that's worth $2, or whatever.
So I think it's important you take personal responsibility. I mean, you work with someone, you work with a professional, but ultimately it's what you do, and you need to have that skin in the game and that attention to what you're doing, and
Yeah.
certainly a clear goal. Stephen Covey talks about beginning with the end in mind, and that's what you have to do.
Mhm.
Just chatting with another guest recently for an episode on putting the pieces together for retirement. What kind of retirement do you want to have? What are you
Mhm.
planning for? Things like that, as far as what your number is. So have that goal that you're working towards, and also understand that how you get there or the strategies that you use uh, can change over time.
Yeah.
I heard an expression.
Dynamic.
I'm sure you've heard of this expression. It's a military one. Commander's intent. You know, you
Oh, yeah.
you get your orders from your commanding officer that I want you to do this. Well, if you have an idea of why that needs to be done, if there are changes in the field and you need to adapt, the example I heard was, go into this area and secure and control the rooftop of this building. Well, you get there and the enemy's already bombed it. The building's no longer there.
Hmm.
So what's your
Hmm.
objective? Well, if your commander told you, I need you to get uh, a line of sight on this area. This building's a good spot, but I need a line of sight for this place over here. I need
Hmm.
superiority there. So he said, all right, well, the building is gone. How else can we carry out this goal of having that elevation
Yeah.
and that line of sight for a sniper on this one area of the
Yeah.
enemy
A
camp or
plan
whatever
B.
it is?
A plan
So
B.
you need to not only your goal but also have clarity on the intent. So in case you have to change your plan, right?
Yeah. And here's another tip for your listeners as well, as we're talking about, like, you don't make a lot of money in the army, right? Like
Mhm.
I didn't sign up to for the army to be a millionaire or a billionaire. Nowadays is kind of the new wealthy. And so it's logistics. So that may be a fancy term for getting the operations and the supply chain done. But here's my tip. Listen up. Use all your resources. I've coached so many people on this, and this could mean when you show up, in a Connex and you have a bunk bed, and then there's another bunk bed over there, and you look in that room. Do you have curtains? Do you have water? Is there a bathroom? How far do I have to walk outside to go to the bathroom? What other vehicle or equipment? And so that's what I tell people. So often they have a tremendous amount of resources available to them, maybe even at the public library with databases and information and research or whatever, but they get stuck on maybe just doing Google searches or whatever. And you're using Google in a chat GPT era. This is not gonna it's not gonna be helpful for you. And so I often will coach people on what other resources do you have available to help.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So, Army lesson number one is to take personal responsibility. You got to know it's your future, your financial independence, not your advisor. So ultimately, it's up to you. A friend of mine had on his desk in his office had a 10-word phrase. Each word was two letters. If it is to be, it is up to me. And is it ultimately it's your responsibility. So
Yeah.
lesson number one, and then lesson number two is, you know, what and maximize your resources. Know what your resources are,
Yeah.
what's out there. And I would think the next step in that is not only knowing what the resources are, but how they can help you, how you can use that tool. I mean, yeah, it's nice to know that you have all kinds of screwdrivers in your toolbox, but if you don't know how to really use each screwdriver and wherever you
Right.
are in your home or whatever you're trying to do with it,
Yeah.
it doesn't do you much good. So
You
it's
could be
sort of a
using the
corollary.
flathead, you
Yeah.
know.
So yeah, you got to know your tools. So any other Army lessons you learned that we can apply?
Yeah, so since you ask, discipline. And a lot of people join and sign up for the army and then they don't like it or failure to adapt or they yell at me or it's dangerous or it's too hot. But discipline is waking up in the morning and doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like doing it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this could involve physical training. They call it PT,
Mm-hmm.
physical training. And when we were at Fort Lewis, Washington, then they would send us out there, but we would might not have our jackets or we might not have our wind pants. And it's rainy in the Pacific Northwest,
Right.
now called Joint Base Lewis McChord. And so it may be in the 50s or 40s and sprinkling. And they say, if it ain't raining, you ain't training. And so you think about that, that's discipline. Are you gonna give up? Are you gonna tell your sergeant like, oh, it's cold, I don't feel like doing this, like I need to go inside and get
Mm-hmm.
my jacket and stuff. So discipline in how we serve our clients at Exponential Advisors is really doing the work from a fiduciary standpoint, right? Putting customers' interests
Mm-hmm.
ahead of our own or the business, the firms, as well as doing those little things, right? And making sure that we're doing the whole financial planning process, making that customer experience painless. That's discipline. And so, for your listeners, what is one thing that you could do today that will be a small thing that can help you improve tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. And having that discipline to follow through, and it kind of ties in with the personal responsibility thing that you have to have. It's not always fun. Personal finance. They everybody we talked about that hair salon commercial. They try to make it look fun, but it's still work. It's still you got to sit down and you got to do it. and
Yeah,
uh, and it means if you want to have the money to invest long term, you need to be disciplined enough to live below your means. You have to have the discipline to stick to that goal. You're going to have all sorts of distractions and bright shiny objects and things like that that are going to be in your way that are going to distract you from that goal. I'll treat myself to this or whatever, when that could go towards your retirement, your children's education, or whatever your long-term savings
absolutely.
goal is. Uh, and when you talk about discipline, doing it even when you don't want to. I'm part of a marketing group. There was he's a former Navy SEAL, and he's written several books and talks about business and everything else. A guy named Jocko Willink, and they asked him a question. He said, what do you do to get things done? You get up, you just don't feel like doing it. You just, how do you get motivated to do what you got to do? And he just had this blank look, and he said, I don't understand the question. You just do it. I mean, he was so into that mindset, that disciplined mindset,
Yeah.
that he literally just didn't understand. Well, you just do it. What does it
Does not
matter whether you
compute.
want to or not?
Does not compute. Does not
Yes.
compute.
So getting to that level. All right. So
Yeah.
personal responsibility, gathering and knowing your resources, uh, and really and discipline, but also the flexibility, I would think, to uh, plan for when things go bad. What happens when things don't
Hmm.
uh, work out to plan? A plan works right up to the point that the first shot is fired. There's another
Right.
military
Right.
saying. So
You
when
know
that
it.
first shot is fired, you better be ready to adapt, right? So that's I'm sure that's something else that you've learned in
Yeah.
the military, right?
Yeah, we're covering all the military quotes today, Steve. So I think it was said that, maybe it was Eisenhower or maybe one of those German generals or leaders, field marshals, that plans are nothing. Planning is everything, right? It's
Yes.
it's that planning process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, when you take a client through. So some people they don't really get the value. Like, why should I work with a financial advisor? How is that going to help me? Well, I think the number one reason to work with a financial advisor is because it's not you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they can provide objective quality advice if it's a good, if that advisor, if he or she is trained and has those skills, good listening and that stuff. But with the planning process, you would be amazed, when you take clients through, you're a lawyer, right? So you have uncovered the issues that clients have been experiencing in bankruptcy or debt issues, student debt, and
Mm-hmm.
all those things. Well, in same similar issues, except not dealing with the courts, we're dealing, specifically with those personal finance issues. But you talk with the client and ask them, do you understand life insurance? A term policy or a permanent policy?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you understand the cost of long-term care insurance compared to paying it out of pocket, right? Because the average cost uh, in Texas for a semi-private room for a skilled nursing facility, a nursing care, is 90 to $100,000 a year.
Yep.
So you may have a good retirement plan. Good for you. You've got 1 million, you've got 2 million. But if you're paying $100,000 a year, that's going to take a dent
Mm-hmm.
in that particular retirement plan. Whereas you can prepare for that and even get a hybrid, a permanent policy with a long-term care. So those are examples where you just take clients through and qualified prospects through the planning process, and then you just uncover right off the jump. Or maybe they didn't understand Social Security and they kind of had a lot of anxiety there, and you kind of talk them through, or
Mm-hmm.
Medicare, and so many issues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that planning for the downside, that's where you get into insurance. Long term care insurance, disability insurance, whether it's temporary or permanent, where you
Mhm.
have that kind of insurance coverage to protect your financial independence should something go wrong. So that sort of stresses the importance of that resource, which is insurance. Uh, so we've talked about several things you learn in the Army. We talked about personal responsibility, knowing your resources, discipline, planning. How do our listeners apply those lessons when they set out and say, "All right, I'm going to achieve financial freedom. I'm going to have a
Yeah.
nice retirement." Walk them through some of the basics as far as what they need to do at least to get started.
Yeah, so what I would tell your listeners, Steve, is to break down the goals into projects, right? Break down the projects into milestones and the milestones into concrete tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to do, right? Because you can have whatever to-do list you have. I use a program called Notion, and Notion is a life operating system. There's a guy named August Bradley. He does some YouTube videos, and he's a certified Notion consultant. But what this does, and this is really super powerful but challenging as well. So it does take some kind of startup costs in terms of figuring out the software. But Notion is a life operating system that takes your business, takes your family, takes your habits and lifestyle and healthiness and your passwords and all those kind of miscellaneous tasks and home maintenance or your apartment, and it puts them into blocks that you can organize. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine having a decluttered, organized system that tracks and manages everything. That's what I mean when I say take your goals, your main big tasks, and break them down into projects, and then break them down into the concrete specific tasks. That's number one. Is be intentional about And you could do it with Kanban boards and visual stuff, and you could create watercolors if you're visual and creative. By all means, you can do that as well.
So
And so
all
the
sorts
second
of
one,
tools. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
you're breaking it down, and because I'm sure that this is a very big project, and you don't want to be overwhelmed. So breaking it down into pieces like that can really
yeah,
help. It's like how do you eat an elephant? One spoonful at a time.
yucky, as my boys would
Yeah.
say, yucky.
And it matters not the platform. I'm a little skittish about anything that's cloud based or web based like Notion
Hmm.
because you only have access to the data as long as you're paying the
Hmm.
fee. And
Yeah,
if you something happens, you can no longer pay it,
yeah,
or whatever, you no longer have access to that data. So I'm just kind of skittish, but
yeah,
there are many different tools that you can use. Absolutely.
sure. By all
So
means, that's just one.
that's the first step. So what else should they be doing?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, this has kind of been a theme of our conversation about being flexible, being Gumby-like, as we say in the
Mm-hmm.
Army, or maybe the Marine Corps says that as well. So, as an entrepreneur, some of your listeners may be starting their own business. I launched Exponential Advisors not too long ago. We were approved by the regulators this year to conduct business. But you got to know when to pivot, you got to know when to adjust, and you got to know when to change. And that applies, that wisdom, that discernment, that insight, that awareness, that paying attention, it's for not just business. Think about relationships, think about you're working in the corporate world. You're on that 9 to 5 grind and knowing, is this maybe, is this the right job for me, and not being afraid, having that courage to make a tough decision, but an informed decision. So as I tell my young boys, please wait. Just be patient. Please wait. And so sometimes we need to pump the brakes. I know I like to engage new ideas and do different things, but I think really, let me share a book with you that I found super helpful. I
Okay.
picked it up. I was on vacation, kind of in Maui with my family this year, and it was in the hotel lobby at like a Marriott kind of place where we were staying at, and it's called Decision Quality. Okay. And it's by a group called, listen to this, the Strategic Decision Group. I mean, that's, but they really have good academic information. And this is powerful for your listeners. So in this book, they actually take you through whether it is a smaller level decision, whether it's an intermediate decision, or whether it's like a strategic decision. And there are actually decision tools out there like the tornado and all these things that you can compare and contrast and model using mathematics for your engineer geek listeners as well, and who really want all the analytical data. But it's by a Stanford professor. I don't have it with me. I think right on the shelf somewhere. But it's DQ, Decision Quality. It's in a red book, and it's by the Stanford professor guy and two of his partners at the Strategic Decisions Group. Real high quality. And if you can make smart decisions, Steve,
Mm-hmm.
it's like chess. If you can make smart decisions and play a good move, it's going to save you 30 minutes of thinking through the poor move that you made. That's going to take a lot more time to unravel and deal with if you just would have been patient and made a good move in the process.
Right. And achieving financial independence and freedom and doing all of this involves making a lot of decisions and being comfortable with those decisions and knowing, all right, it may not be the right decision, it may not be the perfect decision, but it was a well thought out decision that, this is the best. I know that I did the best I could, taking personal responsibility and making
Yeah.
those decisions. So, would you say that that book may help people to, you know, de-stress over some decisions, knowing that they've gone through a proven process of decision making?
Yeah. I mean, this is a process that Chevron has implemented
Mm-hmm.
with tremendous results, right? And they have to make extremely complex decisions about where to drill for oil throughout the world. I mean, these are multi-billion dollar decisions. And the Chevron executive that first implemented this, they actually continued it on in the organizational tradition. They got buy-in and the leadership continued that. So this can absolutely help people. And it's helped me to a certain extent not to rush decisions, go through the process and the methodology, take the time to write it out, look for creative alternatives, and so on. And look for the probabilities of the outcomes, and that takes a lot of pressure off. And then once you arrive, and here's the key, here's one key of this process, you need to have 100% for their kind of variables before you can move ahead and
Uh-huh.
make that decision. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be done to 100% that you feel confident you've done the best research and gathered all the information that you can.
Mhm.
And then once you get 100%, like, okay, I've covered, check the boxes, then you make that decision. Then you get the buy-in and execute.
Mhm. Well, we talked about what you've learned in the military, from military discipline and everything, but you've also drawn on other resources. You mentioned you were in the chaplain's corps, and that you also use faith-based principles in creating these strategies. How do those faith-based principles help you help your clients?
Yeah, the faith-based principles are so crucial. So you look at the financial services industry, and sometimes we have a reputational problem, right? They think that we're just salesmen, uh, and they think that we're just trying to get the next commission or get the next product so that they
Mhm.
can purchase it. And I think that the industry is now evolving where it's no longer, as I mentioned earlier, about just investment planning. It's
Mhm.
about comprehensive financial planning. And so for how my faith informs what I do, at the end of the day, my faith in God, my trust in God that He will provide for this business, I don't have to manipulate the circumstances. And so
Mhm.
I can bring integrity to the table. I can bring character and focus on that rather than trying to manipulate circumstances or promotional agenda or marketing materials, maybe to overstate, oh, this particular investment can do this without necessarily stating all the risks. And
Mhm.
so these are the fundamental principles. And again, I am a sinner, a flawed human being for those who may not have a particular religious tradition. And so please don't hear that I'm perfect or I'm a saint.
Mhm.
We have a new, I'm from the Protestant tradition, but I recognize we have a new Pope
Mhm.
now, an American Pope. I am not the Pope. I'm just an ordinary human being. Doing the best that I can. And so I want to treat people as human beings and serve them to the best of my ability, not just as another number.
Mhm. Well, it's not a guarantee. It's more of a matter of priorities, right? Because you
Mhm.
place uh, your faith in God and His teachings above, you know, a lot of other goals, getting rich, being successful, being powerful, whatever it
Yeah.
is what's important. Not you're saying that because of those principles you're perfect or anything else, but it's
Yeah,
just that you make that more important than everything else.
absolutely.
So, okay. I wanted to talk about a little bit. You mentioned, Googling in the age of AI and knowing what your resources are. Uh, you use, some cutting edge stuff like you're using AI now.
Yeah.
How do you use AI, and maybe how can our listeners use AI as one of their resources or tools to achieve financial freedom or to make some decisions or strategies in their financial life?
Yeah, and so the readers, the listeners, excuse me, will probably know, AI is advancing rapidly, right? So we acknowledge that. But everybody's on the continuum. Some people are the early adopters, some people are the middle mass market, and other people are the feet draggers. I'm not going to use ChatGPT. They have to
Mhm.
bury me 10 feet in the dirt. And that's okay. We are where we are. But we use models like ChatGPT, paid. We use Claude as well. We'll use Perplexity. I found that different models that serve different purposes. Now the LLMs are still text-based. They got the voice coming. They can kind of generate images. They can do research and analysis. What's cool is you can tell it, hey, give me an elite level analyst position and do research on the financial industry. And then, okay, break that down to Texas, or what are the demographics? And so you can do a lot of heavy duty. Now, again, fact checking, making sure they cited their sources. So rather than think of it as the end all be all, which as human beings, we just kind of want to default and can you just do it for me? Right?
Mhm.
Like we don't want to do the work, but think of it maybe for thinking about a research report as you're a curator.
Mhm.
And so you look at the resources that it cites, but then you have to still hold the large language model accountable and
Mhm.
say, don't be lazy, don't be sloppy. I need you to find 20 more academic resources for this industry or for this particular investment analysis. And then I want to give your readers, example of institutional of a company called State Street. Now they're a large provider of ETFs, and
Mhm.
they have a new product, Steve, that they pushed out that has been, successful called State Street Alpha. And it from again, I'm not getting paid for this. There's no compensation. I'm just using an example. We're having a conversation like we would at the bar,
Right.
having a beer or whatever. State Street Alpha, end-to-end solution for businesses incorporating AI and investment management. And so that is, the future.
Mhm.
And so do you think in 5, 10 years, 20, 1 year, that artificial intelligence can invest better than human beings?
Yes, I think with the way things are going now and trained properly, like anything else, it depends upon its education and training and how good it is. And I think that at the rate we're going, yeah, I would say within 3 to 5 years. The problem is, like you say, right now you have these generative AI platforms. The expression is hallucinate.
Yeah.
They come up with stuff, they make stuff up, and it can depend on what your prompts are. And of course,
Yeah.
those who use those platforms know a prompt is your detailed set of instructions. And if
Yeah.
I'm doing something, mainly I use it to write stuff where I already know the answer, or I can
Hmm.
read it and I'll say, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if I'm not sure and they're pulling, I'll say, and be sure to cite all of your sources, provide me with URL links, and
Yeah.
basically footnote everything.
Yeah.
And so you can go through and going back to the first Army principle of personal responsibility, ChatGPT may have come up with a great plan, but go through those links, read the source material, make
Yeah.
sure that the AI is analyzing it properly and accurately.
I love it, Steve. Coming from a lawyer, who is a Juris Doctorate, is going to research and cite previous law. I have always joked around that the extent of my legal knowledge is based on reading John Grisham novels. And so,
Well, even Grisham, his first book, The Firm,
yeah.
had a glaring legal mistake in it, which ironically enough was solved in the movie. I don't know whether you read the book, saw the movie, or
Yeah,
know the
yeah. No,
movie.
I've read I've read most, not his latest, but his new Pelican Brief, A Time to Kill, The Firm, The Chamber, you name it.
Well, in the firm in the book, Mitch McDear is told by the FBI, so we can't get a search warrant, so we need you to go in and find this stuff and bring it
Oh,
out. Well, none of that would ever be admitted because he's an agent of law enforcement. He's a cat's paw.
uh,
We can't go in, but we can send you in to do it. No, you can't. And none of that would have worked. None of that would have been admitted into evidence. For a criminal
no.
defense attorney not to know that is shocking. But when they
Yeah.
made the movie, if you'll remember, he didn't get evidence against the mobsters. He got
Uh-huh.
evidence against the lawyers by proving they were overbilling their clients,
Oh, yeah.
and they ended up going, and because they did it through the mail, it was a federal crime,
Oh
and they
yeah.
all got indicted under RICO. And the FBI agent was pissed because I told you to go after the mobsters. He said, I went after the crime, and that worked.
So they fixed it. They
Yeah.
fixed it in the movie. How about that? And they
So
all went and
yeah,
tackled the
that
FBI
always
after.
surprised me. But yeah, it's and getting back to the issue of whether you heard the story or not of it, this really happened of an attorney in federal court, and he had ChatGPT write him a brief, and he wrote a wonderful brief, had these cases, citations, all of this was terrific. Problem is, none of the cases really existed. Opposing counsel started like digging into this because of course they read your brief, they're going to look up the cases to see how they can argue back. Found out the cases don't exist. He's in court trying to explain, well, and he says, did you check these? And he said, yeah, I asked the AI if these were real cases, and the AI said yes.
Wow.
He got comparatively a slap on the wrist. I think he got like a $5,000 fine and things like
Mm,
that. But just you can't, and that's just the cautionary tale you hear.
yeah.
But you don't want that happening to your money and your finances, where it tells you invest in this and this is a good strategy, and all the best
Yeah.
people are using it, and you lose all your money.
Right.
So it's something going back to that personal responsibility.
Such a good conversation, and I think it's really important, myself included, to always just be careful, be responsible,
Hmm.
uh, and think through how you use AI or how you use any business
Hmm.
tools in communication.
Hmm. Well, so you offer a lot of services through your company. Tell us a little bit about how you help out folks, and if any of our listeners are listening in and want to reach out to you for help, how can they do that? Hello. Oh no.
Oh no, okay, I'm back.
Where'd you lose me?
So just tell me how you help people.
Yeah. So I'll edit it out, and I had this happen before, but uh,
Sorry about that.
no. We'll I just need to know where to pick up. So
So just yeah, just start. Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Sorry.
So if you provide all these services to folks, if any of our listeners are out there and say, hey, I'd like to talk to Joshua, see if he can help me with my financial plan, how can people reach out to you and how can you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out to me, Joshua Brooks, again, a certified financial planner at Exponential Advisors, our website, and that URL, Steve, is exponentialadvisors.net. And we have a resource that people have found very valuable called The Veteran's Guide to Financial Freedom. Hey, I think it's appropriate for this podcast, right? It's like a 10-page PDF, really targeted and tailored for our ideal client avatars. And we serve these particular people the best, which is Army
Mhm.
veterans, right? 21 years in the Army. Busy mommies, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they're trying to manage maybe working a corporate job and then taking kids to daycare, grocery shopping, and all that stuff. So busy mommies, Christian leaders, and digital asset enthusiasts. And those are people who are, interested, want to learn more about Bitcoin and Ethereum. So
Mhm.
exponentialadvisors.net/media. Those are some of my podcast appearances. We've got some short form videos coming out as well. So that's our primary place where you can find us. And then lastly, as you know, Steve and I have talked about briefly, that I'm transitioning and have a new newsletter coming out, and that will be called Exponential Purpose. So be on the lookout for that as well.
All right, sounds good. Well, Joshua, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for offering sort of a different perspective on finances and how you can achieve financial freedom through the disciplines of the Army and faith-based
Yes,
principles.
sir.
And I'm sure the listeners appreciate it. We'll get all those links into the show notes, folks. So those listeners out there, just check out all those links there. So thanks for coming on the show, Joshua.
Yes, sir. Thanks, man.